Just under 100 kilometres south of Victoria's state capital, Melbourne, is the tourist and nature hotspot of Phillip Island, the exclusive venue for the Grand Ridge Brewery Australian round since 1990. Following the celebrations around our 30th visit in 2020, the global pandemic cost us our annual trip down under last year, but we're back for the final round of the 2022 campaign. The Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit dates back to the mid-1950s until 1989 that it rose to prominence by hosting the Australian GP following its second major refurbishment. As for WorldSBK, crowds of over 50,000 are still regularly attracted out to this hallowed ground to witness 4.5 kilometres of white-knuckle riding around what's the fastest track on the calendar. Our overtaking hotspots come from an outstanding weekend here in 2020. All three races decided by less than a tenth of a second. But even though less than 16 seconds of each lap are spent on the brakes, you can pass almost anywhere. The heaviest braking zone is into turn 1 at the end of the 850-metre Gardner Straight, but Dewan Corner is still wide and taken at around 190 kilometres per hour. The run through the southern loop then builds up speed for the next passing place, turn 4, but the natural racing line leaves the door open for a block pass at the slowest corner on the circuit. And finally, watch for turn 10. The riders drop down the hill after Lukey Heights. FIM Superbike World Championship might already be settled for 2022. The season finale serves as a handy prelude to the 2023 campaign that starts in just 3 months' time. It's the latest in the calendar. We've raced in Phillip Island for 26 years, and since the venue will host the season opener in 2023, it will be 2 consecutive visits for WorldSBK. Finish alongside me, the top 10 in the standings, all staying with their current teams in a familiar look to proceedings from next season. So this weekend is all about a pre-winter boost for our podium contenders.
Yeah, these weather conditions that we've just had for the Super Sport race, it's going to be tricky for the Superbike riders out there as well. The sun started to come out, but it's still raining, so a little bit of a sun shower right now, but we've still got the best part of half an hour until the start of this race. We've seen how quickly it dries around Phillip Island. If the rain stops, the conditions are going to be so changeable. You can see from the wind there's good drying conditions out there if you had the washing out in the next few minutes. So we could easily have it where the conditions change a lot over the course of the next hour and a half.
Alvaro Bautista has an unassailable 66-point lead in the Riders' Championship with only 62 still available. A podium in race 2 of the Indonesian round is enough to give him the world title in what is his 4th WorldSBK season. Really should have done it in his debut campaign. Won the opening 11 races of the 2019 season before squandering a 61-point advantage. Back with Ducati after 2 seasons in the midfield with Honda. There were no such mistakes in 2022. Only in Donington Park, really, did he drop any points unexpectedly.
Yeah, you can see as we make our way up through pit lane that just how wet it is. You can see under the canopy that it's bone dry there, but look at the apron and how much rain has come down over the course of the last few hours. Just since the Super Pole session, we've had another shower. We've obviously started the day in wet conditions, wet dry for Super Pole, wet again now for the race. So all the teams and riders really earning their money in this session.
Alvaro Bautista, 2022 world champion, and with that title confirmed, Ducati become the 3rd different manufacturer in 3 years to win the Riders' World Championship. The Bologna factory has the Manufacturers' World Championship and Teams Award well within their grasp as well. They're 14 points away from the Manufacturers' Championship, so a podium here for any of their riders would give them that. While Aruba IT Ducati lost 30 points to Pata Yamaha in Indonesia, but still have a 100-point lead with only 3 races remaining. An historic season for Ducati, in which they've also taken the MotoGP World Championship. Yeah,
you can see those manufacturer standings now. So for Ducati, just getting across the line in this race is their target to make sure they're able to wrap up the manufacturer's crown for the first time in over 10 years. And if they can do that, it really does just showcase just how successful they've been this year. Bautista's done a fantastic job, but you also have to say Ducati's done a fantastic job. Whether you look at Rinaldi and Bassani, they've been very competitive all the way through this season as well, and that's a good indication of where the bike stacks up.
Well, championship settled, but the silver medal is still mathematically in play. Although a hat-trick last time out for Toprak Razgatlioglu saw him gain 21 points over Jonathan Ray and pull 37 points clear. And it now looks likely that Ray will succumb to what will be his lowest championship ranking since joining Kawasaki, though he is guaranteed a 9th consecutive season on the end-of-season podium.
Had a big chat with Jonathan on Thursday. We sat down for a coffee and ended up just chatting away for about 45 minutes. And one of the things he did say was that this season you've seen just how tough it can be out there in the World Championship. He's been so close week in, week out, but at the end of the day, a 100-point margin between himself and Bautista with another round to go shows just how tough it is out there. And he's ridden as well as we've ever seen him ride. And saying that he's a 6-time world champion, to say that really does go something. But for Ray, there's just been that fact that you're up, your back's been against the wall week in, week out, and it is tough.
Jonathan Ray now on a run of 9 consecutive podiums. Hadn't previously managed more than 5 in a row in 2022. What's been a challenging season for him. But his latest 3 rostrum finishes at the Indonesian round moved him onto the 200 mark for Kawasaki. Something really to celebrate, even as his remote championship challenge was extinguished last weekend. 4th and 5th places in the championship have also been hotly contested throughout the season. Best of the rest, really, behind our big 3 that also comprises Toprak Razgatlioglu. Andrea Locatelli took 4th last year by 9 points. He trails Michael Ruben Rinaldi by 34 points with only 3 races to go in 2022. 15 points cover Locatelli, this man Alex Lowe's, and Axel Bassani in the race for 5th.
Yeah, this from this morning's session. Lowe's fast in wet conditions in FP3. He's been fast in all the dry sessions as well. Very well deserved front row start in the Super Bowl session. So he's going to feel pretty comfortable and confident out there with that Kawasaki. It does look very stable when it's out on track, and that is one of the big strengths that that bike has.
As far as those grid positions are concerned, Alvaro Bautista qualifying for a 2nd pole position of 2022, only his 5th front row start of the season, his first pole since Misano in June. Jonathan Ray completes a full season on the front row, 2nd time he's managed that, and Alex Lowe's with his 5th front row start of the campaign will start from P3. Toprak Razgatlioglu qualifying 4th position, only his 2nd time off the front row this season. The hat-trick hero from the Indonesian round last time out, the 2nd hat-trick of his career. He described it at the time as his last chance. He was always expecting Alvaro Bautista to be much stronger here in Australia. He and Bautista tied on 14 victories for 2022, and if either could win all 3 races this weekend, they'd actually match the record for victories in a single season that stands at 17.
Yeah, and I think for Toprak, it's probably been a bit of a surprise just how tough it's been for him in this weekend's running here in Australia.
As you can see, plenty of work going on here for Go 11 as Phillip builds up towards this race. And Ertl, we saw qualify in 7th position earlier on. He's been pretty impressive all weekend, particularly when you consider that he's coming back from quite a knock last time out in Indonesia that cost him race 2. There were some doubts about his participation this weekend. Spoke to him at length earlier on in the weekend. He said he was still feeling a little bit uncomfortable, particularly when he first went out of the pit box in free practice 1, but he's shown good speed throughout, and that's enough to suggest that there could be some big results on the horizon for Ertl and Go 11.
Yeah, I think for Ertl it's obviously a bit of a concern that the bike's still getting itself ready down in pit lane, but you do have a minute until pit lane opens, and then there's 5 minutes until you have to get out onto the grid. But 2nd row of the grid, 2nd Ducati on the grid, really is a good showing in the Super Bowl session.
Axel Bassani then building up for his race here, the top independent in the 2022 World Championship. He's 101 points clear of Garrett Gerloff. That's an unassailable lead. Gerloff beat him to the title last year by just 18 points, remember, on the final day of the season. 24 points on the board for Bassani last time out in Indonesia. That was his best score since Maniko. Yeah,
and chasing down that top 6 in the standings, and the battle between Locatelli, Lowe's and Bassani has been pretty close all the way through this season. And certainly for Axel, he'll know that it's about trying to make some sort of a recovery in this ride, keep your hopes alive going into tomorrow's 2 races.
Final race weekend of Eugene Laverty's career. He's qualified in 13th position, 22 laps ahead of us, and of course mixed and challenging weather conditions could be an opportunity for riders with Brave.
Yeah, I think for Laverty, he'll obviously have an opportunity in much more level conditions. BMW hasn't had it easy over the last few rounds. They've struggled this weekend in dry conditions. As it is, he's only a few hundredths of a second slower than Scott Redding in the Super Pole session. 5th row of the grid, same row of the grid as Michael van der Mark. Loris Baz behind them on the grid as well in 18th spot. So a little bit of work to be done for all the BMW riders, but certainly for Laverty, he'll view this as an actual opportunity to be able to sign off with a decent result.
Michael Ruben Rinaldi is the man defending 4th position in those championship standings, ahead of Andrea Locatelli, who currently sits in 5th place on 245 points, 279 for Rinaldi. So a sizable chunk, but Rinaldi finding himself down in 8th position in the Super Pole session earlier on. He's got Locatelli directly in front of him on track as they come off the line. Yeah,
and it wasn't just a surprise to see Rinaldi down there as well. He hasn't had the pace this weekend. It's been Bautista that's had the considerable step on all the other Ducati riders. A little bit different what we've seen for most of this season, where we've seen plenty of Ducatis up at the front. As it is, it's only this man Bautista that's making the V4 work around here.
Alvaro Bautista, of course, back at the venue where he made his WorldSBK debut in 2019. He immediately pulled off a dominant hat-trick, 15 seconds the winning margin in what was his first ride here with Ducati. And as we've said previously, if he can manage another hat-trick this weekend, it would equal the record for the most wins in a single season. Addition to the lineup then for this weekend, as we see Nagashima making his way round. Tetsuta Nagashima in as a replacement for Iker Lecuona, the Spaniard who crashed heavily during free practice in Indonesia. He was forced to fly back to his homeland and begin his recovery from fractured vertebrae, among other injuries. So best wishes to Iker for a speedy recovery. Nagashima, though, standing in well thus far this weekend.
He's looked good all the way through wet and dry sessions. Big crash this morning, though, at the end of the free practice 3 session, and then another crash in the Super Pole session. But 10th on the grid, very close to Javi Vierge's time. And over the course of the free practice sessions, there was very little to choose between them as well for their average pace. But for Nagashima, single lap in Friday practice gave him quite an edge over his teammate on his opening day as a superbike rider. But it has been an impressive weekend for him.
Exciting stuff towards the end of both of our Super Pole sessions earlier on today. A rarity with Alvaro Bautista qualifying on pole. It's generally been a fight between Ray and Razgat Lioglu, but Bautista had the upper hand for single lap pace. If conditions were dry, we would probably be expecting Alvaro Bautista to at very least be the favourite, if not to waltz away into the distance. In wet conditions, a few different riders come to the fore, and there tends to be a slightly different pecking order. Jonathan Ray and Alex Lowe's on the 2 Kawasaki's are really going to fancy their chances here.
Yeah, they'll really think they've got a great opportunity. Toprak on the Yamaha has turned himself into a very solid wet-weather runner over the last few years, and there'll be a few other riders coming through, especially the likes of Scott Redding and Michael van der Mark and the BMWs from 4th and 5th rows of the grid.
Luca Meyer's back in action this weekend after an ankle sprain last time out in Indonesia, and he has qualified alongside Nagashima on the 4th row of the grid, as well as the top BMW of Scott Redding in P12. The struggles for BMW rather continuing at this Australian round. Eugene Laverty and Michael van der Mark both qualifying on row 5, and Loris Baz at the back of row 6. Alvaro Bautista then pulling into position. A man who sealed up the World Championship crown last time out, of course, in Indonesia. Only did it with 46 points, though. His lowest score since Man Equal, the 2nd weekend this season in which he didn't manage a race win. He's been able to win at so many different circuits in his 2022 title-winning campaign. Did fight his way to the front, though, at one stage during race 2, past Ray and Razgat Lioglu, before eventually settling for 2nd and that world title.
Yeah, you can see everyone now making their way to the grid, and it looks like the last riders to leave the pits have now made their way onto their sighting laps, maybe to do a second sighting lap as well, just to get as much information on the conditions as possible.
Yes, of course, as long as they do that before pit lane closes, just 45 seconds time, they are able to do that and capitalise on a little bit of an opportunity to check where the rivulets are, to check where the water is, and to see what the weather is doing out there as well. Let's take a look then at the grid, starting with our front row. Alvaro Bautista, Jonathan Ray and Alex Lowe's. Bautista, the 2020 2022 world champion, the first for Ducati since 2011. Only the second Spaniard to take gold in the series. This will be his 70th race start with Ducati. He's so far managed 53 podiums in 2 seasons with the manufacturer.
Is just keeping as warm as possible down there. There is a big wind that started to blow down that start-finish straight, so it's easy to get yourself a little bit chilled down there. So all the teams and riders going to have to do what they can to prepare their riders as well.
7th around the circuit. That would also end a winning drought that stretches back 181 days since race 2 in Estoril. Some 24 races we've had since, and for a man who's been on the top step of the podium in over a third of his Superbike race starts, that's been a real barren run.
Yeah, and certainly for Ray, he'll be expecting to be able to get himself into the challenging positions for the race win in these conditions. He's been fast all the way through the weekend, wet and dry conditions, and he'll certainly fancy his chances up against Alvaro Bautista in the west.
Alex Lowe's completes Locatelli and Garrett Gerloff. Razgatlioglu here from P4. Won here actually on his debut for Yamaha in 2020. He's since made it up to a record 30 victories for the manufacturer in his 3 seasons, and with those 14 wins in 2022, he exceeds the tally of 13 from his title-winning campaign matches. Ben Spies' 2009 effort, best Yamaha rider over a single season. This is that he dropped to 6th in the championship that year. He is 6th again in 2022, but with Andrea Locatelli just 11 points ahead of him, having been 35 points up before Lowe stepped forward in consistency from Manicourt onwards.
Yes, you could hear his crew chief Marcel Zwinker down there just asking, how does it feel out there? That's going to be the big question on the grid from every team to their rider after they've done their sighting lap. How does it feel? What are you thinking out there? It's starting to clear up now as well. The rain's gone away and the sun's starting to come out as well. So there's another element that's going to be brought into it in the next 15 minutes. And we saw how quickly it dried this morning.
There's Alvaro Bautista. That's not the 2022 toilet. I think Alvaro Bautista is referencing there, as it's certainly been anything but a toilet as far as his season is concerned. Excellent performance from him to be crowned for the first time here in WorldSBK. Just holding on to those umbrellas looks to be a struggle on the grid. As we move on to Andrea Locatelli on an all-Yamaha second row. P5 for Locatelli, making his first appearance here in the Superbike class. Of course, one on his Supersport debut here in 2020. Arrives from a confidence-boosting weekend in Indonesia. His best-scoring weekend, actually, and first podium since the Dutch round in Assen back in April.
Yeah, and for Locatelli last weekend really was promising, and just the continuation of the form that he's seen in Superpole sessions, but nice to see him able to get it in races all the way through a weekend.
Garrett Gerloff made his WorldSBK debut here in 2020 and will ride his final Yamaha weekend here as well this afternoon, providing his 90th race start. Little pressure on his shoulders really, other than to try and break back into the top 6 for the first time since his podium at the Catalunya round.
And for Garrett, he's been really relaxed all the way through this weekend. Says he enjoys this track and just looking forward to trying to sign off in a bit of style from his Yamaha career.
Third row of the grid will be Phillip Island, Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Xavi Vierge, the first of the official Hondas, with Nagashima lining up in the next position, P10, following that Superpole performance earlier on today. 3 Yamahas on row 2, 2 Kawasaki's on the front row of the grid, and the Ducatis, Ertl and Rinaldi, with a little bit of work to do here from row number 3.
Yeah, and there is a lot of work to be done from that third row of the grid, because the riders at the front have had that pace advantage in wet and dry conditions, so the likes of Rinaldi, they're going to be under pressure in this race.
Here and on P8, he's never been higher than 8th in 2 previous visits to Phillip Island, comprising 6 races over 2019 and 2020. Much more consistent performer in 2022, though. Sunday in Mandalika, something of a blip for him, but even then he maintained what is his longest scoring run to date in the series.
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil, home is got by seas. Our land about in nature's gift, for beauty rich and fair. In history's page let every
The Australian national anthem, and soaking up all of the atmosphere on the grid is our pit reporter, Anthony Nelson.
I'm down here with Garrett Gerloff, helmet on, focus for this race, final weekend with Yamaha, but perhaps the most difficult weekend in terms of understanding the circumstances. What have you seen when in your sighting lap? How are you feeling going for this one?
Yeah, I did a couple sighting laps just to try to get a feeling. The wind is treacherous. Like, once we get onto like turn 2, 3, the wind right there is brutal. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And I mean, it might actually drive the track up a little bit, which could make things really interesting about half race distance. So I'm focused, want to try to get the best result I can, and we'll see how the feeling is the first lap.
Oh, best of luck.
Thank you.
Garrett Gerloff there corroborating what you were saying. Let's complete our third row of the grid course after that race 2 withdrawal in Mandalika following his heavy race 1 crash. Still sporting actually cuts and grazes to his head, and it has been a pretty unlucky spell for the German, struggle with the virus and then a subsequent left arm injury in Argentina. Again, he's far from fully fit. Xavi Vierge completes the third row. He's familiar with this venue already from his 5 visits in Moto2, a podium finisher here in 2018 and arriving in his best form yet in the Superbike class. 11 consecutive top 10 finishes, including his best scoring weekend yet in Indonesia last time out, the first time he's picked up more than 20 points in a single weekend. Just seen Luca Mayas, he'll be coming through from P11 after his Superpole performance, making his return to racing as well after suffering an ankle sprain during free practice at the Indonesian round. That cost him the whole weekend. Tetsuka Nagashima, the replacement rider for Ika Lecuona, the 30-year-old winner of the 2020 Qatar Grand Prix in Moto2. He also made his first 4 appearances in the Premier class this season. The official HRC test rider came in to replace Xavi Vierge at Superbike's Misano test in June. But compared to all the others, of course, that have had a full season of racing in the Superbike World Championship, he's rather thrown in at the deep end, particularly in these challenging conditions.
Done a good job this weekend, though. A couple of crashes have blotted the copybook, but as you can really expect. But he'll think that in the race conditions, he's going to have an opportunity to try and come away with a decent result.
We've brought up now on the 4th row of the grid as far as Scott Redding, who lines up from P12. Redding, who managed 3 podiums out of 3 here with Ducati in 2020. He's also been on the podium twice here in Moto2, and 2 6th places on Sunday showed much more promise than recent outings in Catalonia, Portugal and Argentina. Row number 5 with Eugene Laverty, Axel Bassani and Michael van der Mark. As far as Laverty is concerned, he made his Superbike debut in Phillip Island back in 2011. He'll race his final weekend in WorldSBK than he has been at the 3 most recent rounds, particularly in a pretty miserable trip to Indonesia last time out. Alongside him on that 5th row, Axel Bassani was pretty underwhelming in the Superpole session earlier on today. So Bassani with some work to do. Already on 20 points and 2 podiums more than he managed last season. That was from 37 races. So a big step forward from the 23-year-old in terms of consistency this year. Probably the keenest of anyone to make progress in the standings from 7th, as he did sit as high as 5th after the Portuguese round. He's only 15 points back from the place. Completing that 5th row is Michael van der Mark, the Dutchman who made his Superbike debut here in 2015, makes his 15th race start around this venue this afternoon. 4 top 10 finishes in the last 8 races reminded everyone just what he can do with a strong performance in race 1 of the Indonesian round. Climbed as high as 6th before a crash that denied him points. Those are your top 15. Let's head back down to the grid with Anthony.
Alex, I'm here with 3-time World Superbike champion Troy Bayliss. And Troy, given the circumstances here, it's changing it every minute. You were just telling me that given how it could dry up here, we could be in for a very interesting race.
Yeah, wow, the sun's come out in the last 5 to 10 minutes and there's quite a bit of breeze about. So give this 7 or 8 laps, 9 laps, and we're going to have heaps of dry lines. I don't know how it's going to pan out. It's going to be very interesting.
Got any favourite for the race?
You know, I'm a bit of a Ducati. I'd like to see Bautista have a win, or Rinaldi do a good job as well. But Bautista's been on great form, and like I say, all the guys have been riding so good. We're going to see a great race.
Well, enjoy it.
No worries, buddy. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to that then as we build up. Less than 5 minutes now away from the race start. You see enough spray coming off the tyres of the safety car heading down towards turn 1 with only 2 wheels. It's going to be even more difficult to find your grip out there. But the implication and the indication is that the weather conditions could well dry pretty quickly when we go racing here.
Yeah, are we going to see anyone take a gamble and go out there on an Aragon that Scott Redding on the Ducati was able to make the intermediate tyre work better than anyone else? And that could be a bit of an advantage in these kind of conditions. You can see how sunny it is now on the grid. The conditions just continue to improve all the time. We're not going to have any more rain in the next hour, so it is going to be a case of just drying all the time.
It's going to be someone with less to lose, you'd fancy. The great thing about this race, of course, is that with our championship settled, barring amount of jeopardy, riders will be willing to take a risk if they think it's going to give them a chance here at a race win. So that's something to keep an eye on. Let's just complete the grid here. Xavi Forrest, Hafiz Shireen and Loris Baz from row number 6. We've got Kota Nazane, Oliver Koenig and Tati Mercado on row 7, and Kyle Smith, who will complete the field. Nazane making his first visit back to Phillip Island on Superbike machinery. Of course, this only his second season in the class. It'll be his last as well before he moves on back to the onto the MotoGP paddock for next season. So we've gone through your 22 runners and riders, and now we look back to the front and your front row. Alvaro Bautista on this entire weekend thus far.